What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Mafia podcast. Jerry and Jordan are back at it again, and we are within striking distance of the new NFL league year starting up, which means NFL free agency is starting up soon. This is an exciting
Mhm.
time of the year. It's basically a second Christmas. It's where we hope and dream that they go out and spend this unlimited money that we think that our teams have, and just bring in all the best free agents, and hope they perform on a fantasy level too. So. Jordan, before we get started, how's it going on today?
I am very excited for this episode as well. I mean, it feels like football season is here, even though it's forever away, because we'll get into free agency here. There's already been some cuts that are being made, and I think it is going to be an interesting offseason for free agency with a lot of teams having cap concerns. So you're going to see a lot of movement, a lot of cuts. I don't expect too many huge deals to get doled out this offseason just because of the situation with the cap. So that'll be fun to monitor. But after that, we get right into the draft, and all of a sudden, boom, you're doing rookie dynasty drafts, and it's fantasy season, baby.
Yeah, the so no major news has really happened since the last time we've seen you guys. The biggest one I think is probably Kyle Rudolph was let go. Alex Smith too. We'll bring him up today. Today we're doing the free agent quarterbacks. We had to split it up, so we're going to do three different episodes for free agency. It's going to be quarterbacks in one, running backs in another, and then pass catchers, wide receivers, tight ends in the other. So today's quarterbacks. Alex Smith is going to be on that list. He's one of the names that we have, and he was just recently cut from the Washington football team. We got a couple different landing spots that we like for him, but other than that, really no big news. Justin Simmons is the first one to be tagged with the franchise tag by the Broncos, so they kind of lock up a stud safety for at least another year, hoping to get a longer term deal done with them. Other than that, I mean, it's been a little quiet. Um, Besides the Kyle Rudolph and Kyle Van Noy is probably not coming back to Miami. Anything that you want to bring up before we jump in?
No, yeah, there hasn't been too many exciting ones, especially if you're focusing on fantasy. Desmond Trufant, cornerback for the Lions, got released, but yeah, I mean, nothing that's overly exciting right now that's gonna shake the fantasy community.
All right, so let's get started. If you're looking at the screen, you can see a nice picture of Dak Prescott there. That's going to be our first quarterback we're going to talk about. Um, so yeah, I he is probably the biggest name for that's available as far as quarterbacks go. I know there's other names being thrown out there. I think every episode this offseason so far we've brought up Deshaun Watson, we brought up Russell Wilson's name. Unfortunately, for our show, they are not free agents. So as it stands right now, they're still playing with Houston and Seattle respectively. So the first guy we're talking about here is Dak Prescott. I'm just going to make it simple. I think he stays in Dallas, whether it be on the franchise tag or they finally come to terms on a deal. Last season, I mean, we can definitely see where things changed or how the team went down after he was injured. But over a 16 game span, if you take his numbers, he was on pace for 5,900 yards and 28 touchdowns, and that's including the fifth game where he got hurt. I don't remember how long into the game he did get hurt, but he didn't have any touchdowns that game, and he was only at 150 yards or so. Might have even been less than that. But for a 16 game season, 5,900 yards, you can see like even Zeke took a hit in the backfield there. The whole offense was just not good with Andy Dalton and whoever else they had playing quarterback for him. They need Dak Prescott. He's been a stud since he came into the league. He deserves to get paid, and I think that just for fantasy purposes too, he's going to be the best option for them for your CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. We already mentioned Zeke and also tight ends they got there, Blake Jarwin. So what do you got to say about Dak?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think the Cowboys need him more than he needs the Cowboys at this point. And I
Mhm.
think it's especially true when you look at that division. I mean, quarterbacks are what make the difference. I always say a head coach and a quarterback is what can win you a Super Bowl. So I still am not 100% confident saying Dak Prescott is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. And what I mean by that is, can he carry a team on his shoulders we haven't seen him have to do that with Zeke in the backfield with a dominant offensive line. He's had great weapons. We haven't necessarily seen him do that yet. So I think he's more of a, top 15 quarterback. Is he a top 10 guy? I don't know. That's another question. But what you can't question is that the quarterbacks in that division are terrible. I mean, we have no idea who Washington's going to start, and then Daniel Jones. And I love Jalen Hurts, but he's still young, and there's a lot to be. I think Jalen Hurts could be Dak Prescott-esque, just with a little more speed, if you're being realistic about it. So Dak is by far and away the best quarterback in this division. So if they do bring him back, from day one, they're going to be the favorites based on this alone. But the other thing you have to consider is if they sign Dak to a big deal, that's going to take away from other positions. So are they confident that if they can't allocate as much money to their offensive line? We've seen Travis Frederick retire. They had a lot of injuries. It wasn't the same normal dominant offensive line that we've seen. So if they give Dak that money, they're not going to be able to address a lot of their line concerns that they have both on the offensive and defensive. And their secondary was historically horrendous last year.
Yep.
They're not going to have money to fix any of that. So you're putting this team on Dak's shoulders. And is that a great long-term decision? I don't think it is, personally. I would move on from him. I'd trade him to a team like the Dolphins, who was the team that I had written down, because when we go through these episodes, I'm never going to talk about them 100% returning to their team, because that's just not fun and interesting. I mean, we'll have to bring it up, but I had him going to the Dolphins just because I think that's a team that's ready to win now. They have a great young defense. Their offensive line is young but improving. The weapons aren't the greatest there, but I think Dak would fit in well into that system. So I think he would have success there. The Cowboys would be a way better landing spot just because of the weapons and line. But if I was the Cowboys, I would trade him to a sign and trade with a team like a Dolphins. Get a really high pick. Maybe you get Tua out of it, and at least you have a solid replacement. But I'd get what capital you can. Don't rely on Dak, because they're not going to – the Cowboys will never win a Super Bowl under Dak, because they're going to be under too many cap constraints once they make this deal. So I guess that was way longer than it needed to be. But
so we got a one Cowboys and one Dolphins, and then we got a couple other. I mean, pretty much we got like preferred landing spots for a lot of these guys. But I mean, any team that really needs a quarterback, we're not really going into the guys like the third and fourth string quarterbacks from this past year. Most of them, actually all of them, have started a couple games in the NFL throughout their career. So it's like these guys can play in the league. So I mean, any of these guys could fit in a lot of the places that we're going to talk about. The next guy we got is Jameis Winston. Didn't really see a lot of action last year, but in the year before that, when he was still with the Tampa Bay Bucks, he was in the 30-30 club, which is not a club that you really want to be in. You want to be on the first half of that club, but not the second half. Signed a one-year deal with New Orleans, and then even when Drew Brees went down, he wasn't the next guy up. They used Taysom Hill a lot, but I'm going to stay chalk here, and I'm going to go with the New Orleans Saints. They bring him back. I know Taysom Hill is still under contract for another year, and they're paying him a pretty hefty penny. But I think Jameis Winston, from a quarterback standpoint, I think he brings I think he brings more to the table as a quarterback. I mean, Taysom, no matter who they bring in as a quarterback, even if it is Taysom Hill, then it's Taysom Hill. But if they bring in somebody else, Taysom Hill's still going to be on the field, and he's going to do those gadget plays. He's going to drop back and pass every once in a while. But I think Jameis is more suited for the kind of offense that Sean Payton wants to lead the team down the field. And I mean, they're going to be running the ball a little bit more too with Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. But I think Jameis is the better option as far as a quarterback goes. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, because I know you're a Taysom Hill guy.
yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill, I think what we saw last year is just going to be a pretty high-end backup quarterback, realistically, and a guy that they continue to use on gadget plays. I don't know if I'd still like to see him get a full chance. I mean, they were winning games with Taysom Hill. I mean, they didn't lose very much. Fantasy owners weren't very happy because Alvin Kamara wasn't at his peak performance, but yeah, I mean, realistically, they're going to probably look for somebody that's a little more traditional in a certain sense. But if there's a coaching staff that can use the quarterback appropriately and build an offense to Taysom Hill's skill set, it would be the Saints. So I hope they do that. But I'm not overly confident in them doing that. So I think Jameis Winston's a starting quarterback in this league. I mean, there's 32 teams. He's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in this league, and I really think he deserves a starting opportunity. So no matter where he goes, I went through places like Washington. The Steelers, Ben just restructured his deal, so he won't be leaving in 2021, but you could see Jameis taking over after then. I think he'd be better than Nick Foles in Chicago. I think with New England, he would be an upgrade for them. But I had him going to the Texans as Deshaun Watson's replacement. And it doesn't look like the Texans want to move on from Deshaun Watson, but that coaching staff that David Culley brought into Houston did a lot of great things did a lot of great things previously. So I think that Jameis Winston could have a lot of success in that system. Josh McCown is going to be their quarterback coach. He's been known to work with young quarterbacks and be very successful doing that. So I think pairing Jameis with Josh McCown could be a really good combination for him, just having that veteran presence. And I think that's what Jameis needs. And he definitely got that with Drew Brees. And I think it's time for him to step back into a starting spot. But we'll see if it happens. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, it's really best for him to stay in New Orleans in that Sean Payton system. But we'll see. I just hope he gets an opportunity. I don't want to see him sit on the bench again. I liked watching him. He was aggressive, and even though he ended up throwing 30 interceptions, I mean, he was just, you have to at least semi-respect his aggression down the field, and I don't think his decision-making necessarily got better from sitting on the bench for a year, but we'll see what happens with him. I think he'll definitely be one of the top names to monitor because he has that combination of youth and he's probably the best non-Dak Prescott quarterback on the market.
Well, rumor has it his eyes definitely got better, so we just need to see it over a 16-game season. Next quarterback we're going to bring up here is Mitch Trubisky. His fifth-year option was not exercised, so he becomes a free agent. He's been up and down in the Bears lineup. Well, not in the Bears lineup, but he's been up and down as far as a quarterback for the Bears. Had some good time, had some bad time. They bring in Nick Foles, which kind of was a stab in the back, slap in the face, whatever you want to call it to him. I definitely think he's not back with Chicago. I mean, especially they're paying Nick Foles quite a bit of money there too. I have him going to the San Francisco 49ers, which would kind of open up some space there with for Jimmy Garoppolo to go somewhere else, which he's not on our list today, so we won't get too far into him. But Mitch Trubisky, I mean, San Francisco could have drafted him. What was it, 5 years ago when they made the trade with Chicago? I don't remember who their quarterback was at the time or what they were looking at, but he can play. I mean, he can play. Just give him the right talent around him. San Francisco has a solid offense. They got George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the game. They got Brandon Ayuk. They got Deebo Samuel when he's actually on the field. They got a solid run game, which is what he had in Chicago. And then they got a top defense, which is what he had in Chicago. So he doesn't have to come in there and be a hero. He doesn't have to come in there and command the ball in his hands and take over a game. He just has to basically just go in there, play Mitch Trubisky football, which could be good, could be bad. But
I don't know what that means.
But rely on the defense more so to win them games and stay competitive in that pretty competitive division. Because it's really hard to say who's the bottom team in that division right now. It's even hard to say who's the top team in that division right now. But Trubisky, I think, is the kind of quarterback. I think he would be an upgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm giving him a lot of credit right now, but he'd be an upgrade to Jimmy Garoppolo, and it's a team where he doesn't have to go in and do too much, but you could still help them win games.
I never thought I would hear somebody say Mitch Trubisky football in my entire life, but here we are, and we've heard it now. And I love that this highlight film is just him against the Lions, because that was essentially his entire season, was just carving up the Lions. But
did they play him 16 times?
I mean, if they did, he would be the MVP of the league. He would throw for 50 touchdowns. I had him going to Washington. I think the biggest thing for Mitch Trubisky is going somewhere where there's going to be competition. He even spoke to that a little bit last season, as when he got benched, it lit a fire under him a little bit. And when he came back, I mean, you saw him play much better than really we've ever seen him play. So I think if you bring him in, he'll still be competing with Kyle Allen and Tyler Heineke there. So he's not going in there the day one starter. He'd have to work and improve himself. And Washington does have Terry McLaurin. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, a great defense. Similar to what you said, it's not going to put a lot of pressure on him day one in Washington. And it gives him that competition that I think he really, really needs. So that's where I like him going, is to the Washington Football Organization team club.
Now, the thing with Trubisky too is, I mean, unless you're in like a super flex, no matter where he goes, I don't think you're going out there and you're all over him to draft him. So that's one thing that we got to remember for you guys is we're a football show, but we're a fantasy show too. We're a fantasy show first. So we're talking about Mitch Trubisky here, but you're not going to be going out and drafting him with a top pick and saying, oh, he landed in Chicago or he landed in Washington or San Francisco, and I definitely need to have him in my hands. So, but these are places where we think that they can thrive and be good and maybe be a late waiver wire pickup for your team, and also hopefully extend their career in the NFL. Next guy we're going to be talking about is Cam Newton. He had a pretty rough 2020, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, just a little bit.
I mean, he averaged half a touchdown a game over a 16 game pace as far as passing touchdowns go. He had, what was it, 12 or 13 rushing touchdowns. So he definitely could still put the ball into the end zone on the ground. And I mean, a lot of it is because of the wide receiver core that they had there too. But if you watch some Patriots games, he was throwing the ball into the ground. So you got to put some on Cam's shoulders too. I still think he can play. I'd like to see him have another chance. I got him with Washington. Basically, kind of the reasons that you said with Mitch, but with Cam, go somewhere that he can compete. And it's familiar Ron Rivera. So I think not that they were actively looking for somebody last year, but Rivera goes into Washington, and they already have Dwayne Haskins, a 15th overall pick. They weren't going to give up on him that soon. I mean, they still gave up on him, but now it's a year removed. Cam Newton's available. Ron Rivera knows a little bit more about the team that he's with. He can go and get his guy that he had when he was in Carolina. And I think Heineke might end up being the starter there, but I think that he needs some competition, and Cam Newton would be some good competition for that offense. And you said it already. They got a championship caliber defense. They do have some weapons out there with Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, even Logan Thomas. He came on, so they got some weapons better than the weapons that they had in New England for Cam. And I think that he'd be a good fit there.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad fit at all. I think that would probably be my second one. The one that I have, I am on the opposite end. I don't believe Cam Newton's a starting quarterback in the NFL anymore, based on what I saw last season. And there's really no excuses. I mean, I'm trying to think of an excuse for the guy, and I
threw a lot of passes to the hash marks, and they caught them all.
Yeah, I mean, the ground, he had 100% completion percentage to the ground. But I mean, if you just watch, I mean, you look at his numbers, okay, when you throw in the rushing touchdowns, 20 total touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I mean, he still had some playmaking ability, but I mean, he was so inaccurate that no matter what kind of receiving core he had, they wouldn't have caught the ball because it wasn't going anywhere near the receivers. And the Patriots receivers did struggle with drops a little bit as well. But the reality is, from what I saw, I don't think he's a starter anymore. I really don't. With that being said, I think his best opportunity would be to go somewhere where he would at least compete and not be necessarily handed the job, but he would have a good chance to win it. So I had him going to the Bears. So I guess we just kind of flip-flopped a few of them here, which is probably going to be a common theme that you notice. But I mean, same situation. We saw David Montgomery come on. The Bears' offensive line is kind of horrendous, so maybe it wouldn't be the greatest for him passing because their pass protection was bad, but we did see David Montgomery come on, so their run blocking scheme did improve throughout the year. So Matt Nagy is known to be a creative mind as well, so I think he'd give Cam Newton an opportunity to succeed. But I think the Bears, if Mitch Trubisky doesn't come back, they need to bring in some sort of competition there. And I can't see them rolling with Nick Foles. They're going to at least have to bring competition in there. And Cam Newton and Nick Foles, I think it would be a pretty good battle, honestly. They're kind of the two on two ends of the spectrum right now, but I think that would be a nice fit for him.
I would rather have him if like I'm going to stream or even in a super flex. I'd rather have him in Washington. If he goes to Chicago, I don't think I'm touching him at all, especially if Allen Robinson isn't there. But
yeah,
at least with Washington, he's got weapons. He can get some get some points there, and then the defense can also turn the ball over and get him some short field. So, but he's another one of those quarterbacks where we're probably not touching in fantasy unless we're desperate. That's I think we could agree on that. Yep. Next guy we got here is Andy Dalton. He kind of stayed afloat last season with Dak Prescott going down. He was forced into some action there. Wasn't terrible, but I mean the whole Dallas Cowboys team as a whole was just not good at all when Dak Prescott went down. I mean they weren't even good when Dak Prescott was healthy. Dak Prescott was better for fantasy and put up better numbers, but they were in it to win the division until the last week of the season, which isn't really saying much in that terrible division. But I got him. I think a good spot for him. I think he could still play, but I got him going as a backup, more of a mentor, and that's to Jacksonville, kind of mentoring, helping out Trevor Lawrence. And that's really all I can say about that. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere. I think that Jacksonville is probably going to want to bring in a cheaper veteran guy. I mean, they got Minshew there, but he's not really the guy that you not that you don't want him teaching your young quarterback, because he himself is a young quarterback. That's basically what I'm trying to say. But Andy Dalton, he's been around the league. Not really the league. He's been around a long time, and he's made the playoffs a couple times. I think that he'd be a good, solid backup to help out a guy that's supposed to be the next Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to the last few here realistically are not going to be starters next season. Are they going to start games? Probably at some point, but I have Andy Dalton for a similar reason going to the Denver Broncos. And there's already been some rumors that the Broncos are not necessarily happy with Drew Lock's progression so far. So I think this is going to be a huge year for Drew Lock to determine whether or not he's the future of the Denver Broncos. But I do think the reality is, even though the Chiefs are in that division, the Broncos and John Elway, he doesn't want to lose. I mean, he's kind of said before he doesn't want to rebuild. He wants to retool and be a competitive team as soon as possible. So I do think it would be a good spot for Andy Dalton, though, because if Drew Lock struggles for the first half of the season, I don't think he'll end the season as a starter. I think they wouldn't hesitate to put the backup in if they have a viable option. And Andy Dalton did show last year that he could at least win games. The Cowboys were 6-5 with Andy Dalton in the game last year. So, I mean, it wasn't or when he played in a game. So it wasn't a terrible season for Andy Dalton as a whole. So I really think that he should go somewhere where he would have at least the potential to start a few games. And like I said, I think Drew Lock is not necessarily locked in to be the starter the entire season.
Oh, got the puns going.
Oh, it's a good night.
All right, let's we got a couple Andy Dalton highlights here that we'll get through. Well, we'll just get through this one. Nice catch by Amari Cooper.
Yeah, that's not actually an Andy Dalton highlight film. It's just for the receivers.
It was just against the Eagles, so that makes sense. The next guy we got here is the beard, Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's made his way around the league, and for that reason, I have him going to the New England Patriots. Do I have one of the New England Patriots? Yeah, I do. I got him going to the New England Patriots, and mostly because of he could complete the AFC East gauntlet. He's played for Miami, he's played for Buffalo, and he's played for the Jets. The only team left is the New England Patriots. And I mean, they could bring in a veteran who can still play in the league. We saw him play last year. We saw him have a pretty solid season last year. He was even brought off the bench for a struggling Tua. Helped them win a few games, put them in a position to potentially make the playoffs. It came down to week 17 for them to be in or out. And I think they actually controlled their own destiny. They just ended up losing that game. So But Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, he's still got it. He's a don't give a F kind of quarterback. I mean, he'll just go out there, he'll sling it, he'll throw it. If he throws an interception, shrug his shoulders, come back the next series and throw on the first play. And I think that's the kind of quarterback that somebody like the Patriots could use, where they tried the Cam Newton experience last year. And it didn't really work out. I mean, they got some touchdowns on the ground from him, but we're used to seeing good defense and Tom Brady kind of carry the team. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's not Tom Brady, but he could definitely stand back there and make the throws that are needed to be made for them to win some games, and then try to just win it with their defense. And I think the Patriots would be the best place for him to go.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the Cam Newton experience should be a ride at Six Flags. I like
It won't
that.
be as fun as the Michael Vick experience, though.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'll pass then. I have Ryan Fitzpatrick going to the Giants, and I think it's kind of a similar situation to when he was in Miami. I mean, behind a young quarterback. And I think, once again, I think the Giants are kind of in a similar situation to what I just said with the Broncos, where if Daniel Jones stinks, I mean, Joe Judge is a very no nonsense coach. If we learned anything from year one, I mean, he fired an offensive coach after like 3 days because he wasn't happy with him. I mean, he will legitimately do whatever it takes to win. So if Daniel Jones keeps turning the ball, and not that Ryan Fitzpatrick won't turn over the ball, but if Daniel Jones keeps struggling, I'll say, I could see them bringing in Ryan Fitzpatrick to try to win some games rather than just, and it's that, I guess, Patriot way still, because Brian Flores in Miami, Joe Judge now with the Giants, they're probably two of the better head coaches we've seen so far come out of the Bill Belichick tree, and that's not saying much because there's been some big failures, but I would really like to see him with the Giants. I don't believe in Daniel Jones personally. I haven't seen anything where I'm like, oh, he could definitely be a franchise quarterback. So you bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, maybe he helps you win a few games, give him Saquon, give him a nice running game. Maybe he can do a little bit of damage there. But yeah, I like the Giants do need to bring somebody in. Colt McCoy, who was their backup last season, he's heading into free agency too. No, we're not going to talk about Colt McCoy, so I'm sorry if that disappoints you. But they definitely need to bring in a veteran guy no matter what. And why not bring in a guy that can win you a few games if he has to step in?
I think it's safe to say that wherever he goes, there's a Ryan Fitzpatrick super fan that's just ready to get his next jersey.
Oh, of course. That's actually a great goal. I'm going to try to get an autographed Ryan Fitzpatrick jersey from every team he's been on.
That'd be pretty fun. Just frame them all. All right, the next guy we got is Jacoby Brissette. I'll keep this one short and sweet. I mean, again, I think it's another backup situation. I think he just stays in Indianapolis. Familiar with the system there. They got Carson Wentz coming in, so it actually might even be better for Brissette because we know Carson Wentz doesn't know how to stay on the field. So Carson Wentz goes down, Brissette comes in. He's familiar with Frank Reich and the Colts receivers and how the offense works over there. He could be a guy where if Wentz were to go down and you're looking for a waiver wire pickup, a late waiver wire pickup in a super flex, or you got 6 teams on bye, Brissette could be a guy, depending on matchup, that you could bring in. We've seen him do a little bit with his legs. He also does have a strong arm. They actually brought Brissette in on some of the longer, like more Hail Mary and deeper throws last year over Phillip Rivers because he does have a stronger arm. And you got Michael Pittman going into year 2. T.Y. Hilton is still there. They're going to have a stronger running game than I think they've ever had, or at least since Edgerrin James was there with Jonathan Taylor. And they got solid tight ends. So if Brissette has to go in there, like I said, he's already familiar with it. He's got some weapons there. They got one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in the league. I think that he'd be mildly relevant if he had to start a few games.
Mildly relevant. I think that's really Jacoby Brissett's upside at this point. I thought about the Colts and being boring like you, but I honestly don't think that he'll go back there. I think that was part of the reason they took Jacob Eason, was to potentially start for him if they couldn't find a better option, but to at least be the backup there long term. And I've always said I think Jacob Eason fits in really well with that system, so I don't think it makes sense for Brissette to go back to the Colts, and I don't think they necessarily need him. So I have him going to the Seattle Seahawks, who as of right now are backup quarterbackless. And I like this spot a little bit too. I mean, number one, we don't know what the future of Russell Wilson holds. And I could see Russell Wilson getting injured at some point, if we're being honest. That offensive line has been terrible for the last few years, and he's really gotten beaten up. So I think if you bring his strong arm in with weapons like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, I think he could have a lot of success. And I mean, it's going to be hard with that offensive line for any quarterback that comes in, but I think that would give him a good opportunity to. And we've seen Brissette, he can play. I think he's a high-end backup quarterback, is what I would say. You know, if I had to list all the quarterbacks, he's probably in the 35 to 40 range, somewhere around there. So you bring him in, you can learn a little bit from Russell Wilson. Maybe he leaves and you get to be the bridge guy to the next quarterback, or maybe Russell Wilson goes down and you get an opportunity to throw to some great weapons. So I definitely see the Seahawks bringing in I don't want to say veteran, but I guess Jacoby Brissett's a veteran. I guess I don't view him that way, but technically he's a veteran. But the Seattle doesn't have anybody behind Russ right now, and that's definitely got to be addressed.
Oh, does that mean we have to talk about Geno Smith?
We do have to talk about Geno. We should have just had a Geno Smith episode.
All right. Next quarterback we got here is Tyrod Taylor. I think he's going to play for the he's going to go sue the doctor that stabbed him in the chest.
Yeah.
But no, I got him going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, another backup. Everywhere Tyrod's gone, he's been a nice locker room guy, good for the younger quarterback. I think with Philadelphia, I see a lot of similarities between Tyrod and Jalen Hurts, and I think that just being in the locker room, helping out the younger quarterback and Jalen Hurts, and they could also run similar. They could run similar plays against the defense in practice, so kind of help him out and leave Jalen Hurts on the sideline so he doesn't get hit in practice and get some kind of injury. But Tyrod just coming in there and helping out Jalen in his progression. And he can play. I mean, we've seen him start some years. We've seen him start quite a few years. And most of it was Buffalo, but he started with Cleveland before Baker came in. He started in LA before Herbert came in. I just think that he's in that backup role now, and I think Philly's a good spot for him.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie to you. I did have Philly down, but I never like to copy you because I like to be as different as we can be. So I do like this option as well. I have him going to the Dolphins, replacing Ryan Fitzpatrick. And the one thing you always hear about Tyrod is he's a great leader and he's a great mentor to young quarterbacks. So I think bringing him in to work with Tua would be huge for Tua. And, if Tua struggles again, it could be an opportunity for Tyrod to start again. So I like him going to the Miami Dolphins.
Of
That's
Miami. And then we got two more. The next one that I have, well, we both have Alex Smith, but the team that I got him going to, I guess he could be a starter, and that's the New England Patriots. Again, I mean, I've already talked about the Patriots when I talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, these are two completely different quarterbacks, but I think that he would have the best chance to start going to the Patriots. He's a guy. He's a nice Grizzly vet that Bill Belichick and the Patriots offense needs. He does check it down a lot, so he'd be able to utilize the 400 running backs that they got and the wide receivers just running short routes. If he were to start there, he'd be somewhat fantasy relevant. I mean, there's probably about 22 other quarterbacks that probably take over him, and that's including some of the rookies coming in. But if you catch him on a good week where he's facing against a weaker defense, the Jets, then he could definitely have some fantasy relevant games there. And he showed last year that he can still play. Now, he did get hurt in the one game, and I know everybody was gasping their breath, and his wife was looking away, but he came back and he ended up playing a little bit more after that. He didn't play in the playoff game, but he's definitely he still can play. I mean, they have to protect him like you do with any quarterback, obviously. I mean, but I wouldn't wish him to go to Seattle. Don't want him to get killed out there, but definitely got to protect him. They got, like I said, they got decent weapons, or they don't have decent weapons out there in New England. I didn't say that. I'm sorry. But they could get decent weapons out there in New England, and I think that his best opportunity to start would be New England.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay if you think New England has good weapons. We'll just say that you're
I'm
Jacoby
still
Myers'
on.
cousin. Jacoby
I'm
Myers'
still on the
cousin.
Nikhil Harry hype train.
Oh my gosh.
I do like
Okay.
Damien
Well,
Harris though.
that's okay. That's acceptable at least. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm gonna be negative. Maybe nobody wants to say this out loud because Alex Smith is a good story, and don't get me wrong, it's incredible, yada yada. He's not a starting quarterback in this league. I'm sorry. He threw more
Mm.
interceptions than touchdowns last season, and the Washington football team has a good offensive line. And if there's one thing, what have we always said about Alex Smith throughout his career? Whenever you think of game manager, I always think of Alex Smith first. And what that means is you're not turning the ball over. So to me, now that he's turning the ball over, what does he have left to provide a team? To me, the only thing he can provide a team anymore is mentorship because he has been through a lot and he's been through winning seasons, losing seasons, benchings, playoff games. I mean, he's been through absolutely all of it. So I have him going to a team where he can A, mentor somebody, and B, he might have an opportunity to start. I have him going to the Bengals. And I think a lot of people forget that Joe Burrow missed the end of last season. We're not 100% sure if he's going to be ready for the start of the season. So maybe Alex Smith has to step in for the first few weeks while Burrow recovers, or even if Burrow's ready to go. Alex Smith's a fantastic mentor to him. We saw last season Ryan Finley wasn't getting it done. Brandon Allen wasn't getting it done in Cincinnati. You might as well bring in a veteran guy. And Alex Smith is better than Ryan Finley and Brandon Allen. I will give him that. So I'll give him some sort of credit. I don't know how much credit that is necessarily, but I like him going to Cincinnati, and I think that they definitely need somebody behind Joe Burrow that they can at least rely on to be consistent if he isn't fully healthy.
All right. And our last quarterback that we got here isn't technically a free agent, but we ran out of good free agents, and we didn't want to talk about your Colt McCoys and Geno Smiths. So we got Marcus Mariota. The reason we're bringing him up is because his name has been floating around in trade rumors. Derek Carr, it seems like Gruden wants to go or stay with Derek Carr, so Mariota could be on the block here. And we saw him when he came in last season. He came in for the one game. Derek Carr got hurt, and he didn't look too bad. And he actually looked better than good.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still young too. I mean, he's what is he the same age? I mean, he was in Winston's draft. I don't know who's older, but I think Mariota might be a little bit older. If anything, it's only within a year or two, but he can still play. He does have some legs to him. He's got a pretty strong arm. I don't think he got a fair share in Tennessee, and what we saw in or Vegas when he came in, he looked pretty good. But I got him going to Houston. Again, it would be a trade, but it wouldn't be a trade for Watson. The value definitely that's a little lopsided if you ask me.
Close.
And Watson wouldn't. I think Watson would be good in Vegas, but he wouldn't. That's not a good trade there. But I think that Mariota would be a solid replacement for Watson if they were to move on from him. It's a rebuilding team there too, so he could definitely help them out in the rebuild. Houston does have some decent weapons as far as wide receivers go, and they got David Johnson, who they're still. I don't know what's going on with them if they're still going to be using him there, but yeah, I mean, we only got a one game sample from him last year, and I got him going to a team that has a top 3 to 5 quarterback right now. So there's not really much I could say about him. I think that Houston would be a good place for him.
Yeah, and David Johnson, actually, I guess that was news. It kind of went under the radar, but they restructured his deal. It's 1 year, $6 million for next season, and then he'll enter free agency. So he's at least there one more season. I have him going to the Patriots, and I will say, I mean, I guess I've been a little negative with some of the quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota looked really good. I mean, I don't know what John Gruden put in the water that Marcus Mariota was drinking, but his arm looked much stronger. And I think it could have been a matter of Tennessee just not using his skills appropriately. Because I mean, he really was dinking and dunking, but he showed some arm strength. He still showed he has that speed and athleticism. And I think the Patriots at least showed with Cam Newton that they can be creative enough to build an offense around somebody like Marcus Mariota, but Mariota has way more arm talent at this point than Cam Newton. So I think I mean, they were 7-9 with Cam Newton. Marcus Mariota, I think, is a big improvement. I know there's not great weapons there, but I think the Patriots know, and Josh McDaniels would build a system around Mariota, and I think that he could be really successful there. And, I would dare to say that Marcus Mariota is a top 32 quarterback as well. And that's one of those, I'd really have to list it out, but I think he can start in this league. I think he deserves another opportunity, and I would like to see it with the Patriots. I think that he could do good things there.
All right, so that'll do it for the quarterbacks that we had listed, the 10 of them. But there are a couple other things that I do want to go over and ask you. Number one is neither of us mentioned the Jets, which what do you think about? Do you think any of these quarterbacks would be good with the Jets, or do you just want the Jets to fall off the face of the earth?
I mean, I think either the Jets are going to stick with Sam Darnold, or they're going to draft a guy like Zach Wilson. They could still use a backup. Joe Flacco, I believe, is not going to be there next season. I think his contract runs out. So, yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a candidate for maybe a Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissette, a guy that you are pretty comfortable as a backup. And because I really don't think they're going to be looking to bring in even a Ryan Fitzpatrick level kind of guy, honestly, because when Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, he's a good enough quarterback where he's offering competition to some degree. And even Cam Newton, Cam Newton's not coming in and saying, you know what, I'm 100% the backup. Cam Newton's going in there to win a job. So I could see them going after a lower end. Even Alex Smith, I don't know why Alex Smith would want to go there, but I'd say Brissette, Tyrod. But realistically, I could see it being even lower on a guy like Colt McCoy, who I mentioned earlier. Just them bringing in a guy to fill in a roster spot, if anything.
It's because they got to field the team. And then the last thing before we wrap up is we also didn't mention either of our teams, and our backups are John Wilford, and we got Matt Barkley over here in Buffalo, but he's set to hit free agency as well. Any of these guys that you want, and we all know, I mean, Stafford missed some time last year, and Josh Allen, he plays like a bulldozer, so he could take one hit and be out. So I mean, definitely be nice to have a backup quarterback that could help our teams. Is there any of these guys that you mentioned that you want behind Stafford?
I really liked John Wilford. I mean, it was a very small sample size, but I thought he showed a lot of moxie, and Sean McVay changed the offense to fit his strengths. So I think Wilford is fine right now. I really wouldn't want to spend any money on a backup. The Rams are already going to be in a salary cap crunch, so I don't think they're going to be able to afford it. And with the Bills, I mean, there's a lot of people that liked Jake Fromm too. I mean, he's still hanging out around there too, and I think that would realistically be their plan, is to roll with Fromm. A lot of people thought Fromm at one point was a first-round talent, so I think that that's not a bad backup to have. I'm a Georgia fan, so I got to watch him a little bit. I think he's more of he reminds me of Alex Smith a lot, honestly. I don't think he's ever going to have that big arm, and he's going to be a huge game changer, but I think he can definitely manage a good team.
Yeah, I mean, they had to keep him away from the facilities this past season just so they had a quarterback in case Barkley and Allen both got COVID. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably, if I were to sign any of these guys, and obviously money would be an issue, but I think Jameis would probably be the guy for me. I think that I mean, obviously I want a quarterback that could come in and start and play and be able to really not miss a beat. And I think that of the guys that we mentioned, without going out and paying Dak Prescott $35 million to be a backup quarterback, I think Jameis would be that guy. But I think that he's looking for a starting job somewhere, so I don't know if that's going to happen. I think it's going to be Josh Allen, Jake Fromm, and then maybe a rookie or one of these other guys that aren't on our main list today, like a Colt McCoy or something. But that'll do it for the quarterback show. Next up, we got running backs, and then next week we'll have wide receivers and tight ends, and then by the time you listen to all of this, free agency will be open.
Mm-hmm.